driver versus iron, Hugh. Lots of confusion around it. We're going to talk about the specifics of the differences between the two.
Okay. So basically there's two clubs that have fundamentally different impacts to the rest, and both at opposite ends of the bag.
Yeah.
Driver, putter.
Yeah.
They're the two clubs where we don't hit the ground, and it's not desirable to hit the ground. Everything else, hitting the ground is generally a pretty good idea, and we're even talking fairway woods here. So we've discussed how low point relative to the golf ball is particularly important. The low point's above the ground with a driver. The ball's sat in a tee of varying heights these days. So fundamentally, there has to be at least a different start position for driver than there is for irons.
Yeah.
Now, the question I posed recently on social media was, is there a difference in the swing between driver and iron? And in reality, I think we could argue about this all day. I don't think there is one set rule that you can apply to everyone. There's some very good drivers who are trying to do something fundamentally different, and some very good drivers who just change setup and make the same golf swing.
Yeah.
There are some people who hit draws when the ball's in the ground, fades when it's off the tee.
Yeah.
There isn't one set of rules we can apply to everyone. But if we can accept that hitting the ground with a driver is a bad thing, hitting the ground with irons and fairway woods is a good thing, then what are the differences that we need to incorporate, or the students need to incorporate, to be able to hit them better?
Okay, so we've got this ball here will be representative of an iron. I've got myself an 8 iron, and then we'll tee this one up for approximately around about how high I would get my driver. So we've got the face-on view here, and then the down the line. We're going to see a few differences with really how we're going to set up. So what would you like me to do to demonstrate this?
Well, we're going to talk about the iron setup first of all, and identify the differences in swing, okay? So there's a fundamentally different task from iron to driver. The task, as we've identified with the iron, is to hit the ground after the ball. That's how we take divot. That's how we compress the golf ball. There we go. Now, how far in front of the ball we hit depends on every player. Swing speed, shot shape, there's a ton of different things to consider.
Yeah.
But we know pretty much black and white. We know that the best players in the world all hit the ground after the ball when it's on the ground.
Yeah.
So if you look at the sort of setup window for ball position, and setup window I think runs from sternum, so back of the ball under the sternum, to the front of the ball under the lead shoulder.
Yeah.
Anywhere in there, the low point is in front of the golf ball. Before you swing, of course.
Yeah.
Because we know funny stuff happens,
We
right?
can do a lot of funky stuff from there.
Now, when we're talking about driver, my preference with driver is a zero angle attack. I don't like to see the club being, or the sweet spot of the club moving too much up with driver, particularly with high-speed players, because swing direction and path get confused and you get funky strikes as a product of it. So my baseline with the driver is the middle of the golf ball under the lead shoulder.
Yeah.
Now, when we're talking about how we would then orientate our body relative to the golf ball, so if I've got the ball on the ground for an 8 iron, back of the ball under the sternum, I'm looking for my knees, my pelvis, and my shoulders to be fairly level. As the ball moves further up, because the trail hand, the right hand's lower in the grip, you're probably going to see this angle through shoulders and potentially pelvis tilt a little bit this way.
Yeah.
With the ball up here, iron play back here, everything a little bit more level. They would be the fundamental differences.
Yeah, I like to, for the simplicity of this analogy, say that at the peak extension, if we were going to swing this really, really fast from, let's say, the alignment stick in the center of my stance here, because the lead hand is higher on the club than my backhand, we're going to find that in reality it's going to be one straight line at the moment of impact is going to be the bottom of that swing arc, right?
I think there's a point of difference here. So when the shaft is vertical, under the lead shoulder, that is where the low point will be. And with a driver, I like to see all of that lined up at the point of contact.
One big long line, so elbow crease right there.
Correct.
Pretty much directly at the golf ball.
Through the mid of the grip into the end of the shaft.
That's a great reference for players to look at, because I think so many just throw it under the generalization bucket of inside of the front foot, and their upper body could be way over here or way over there.
Forgive me for being coarse. It's just horseshit advice. When I'm looking at ball position, I'm looking at it relative to the whole system, never the feet.
Yeah, exactly.
That basically what matters, where the lead shoulder is relative to the golf ball. End of story.
Yeah, and what we'll see is that, for example, if, let's say, the ball position was well forward, is that I could make this huge big diving movement, get my upper body in front, and then all of a sudden I am hitting down. within reason, we want the ball between your feet,
Correct.
right?
It's
But
a decent start point.
yeah, if we could see at the moment of impact that we're lining up with the inside of your armpit crease up with the golf ball at impact, it'd be very much that point at address. So
For driver.
for driver, yeah. And then for irons, I would generally like to see if, assuming my body's stacked relatively on top, if I just drop that down from there as a reference, we're going to see that kind of falls about on the inside of that front foot. Now, relative to speed, for me, that works quite well, which is about a comfortable club head or just in front of center of stance, assuming my upper body and lower body's on top.
Assuming that you've organized your tilts appropriately.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Do you have a system? I've got a great one that works really well for players when it comes to setting up the driver to try and manage that, because I find a lot of players do struggle with trying to figure out how to orientate their body. Is there anything that you teach of how to get players into a really functional driver setup position?
A functional setup for everything.
Yep.
Effectively, I want to see, as I said, knees, pelvis, shoulders relatively level to the ground when the ball's on the ground. So I'll ask the player just to stand up. Generally, most players stand up with a stacking system in place and then just bend over the golf ball.
It's amazing how simple that is and how often overlooked it is. Instead of addressing the golf ball from this walked in angle all the time, if you're a player and you're out of position, simply just by standing up, not only do you get a better reference of, let's say, a relatively perpendicular face, but also getting the upper and lower body on top. 100%. So then when you bend straight down from the hips, you might find that feels quite different from what you actually normally do.
And I mean, a camera angle I use when I'm coaching is I'll view the player from behind.
Yeah.
Great for looking at where the spine's orientated.
You can see all sorts of positions of upper and lower versus what you can see from face on.
And you've pointed this out, that if you have the driver up here, so underneath the lead shoulder, that would be my kind of baseline. If I relate that back to me, it's probably on my left instep.
Yeah.
Ball's still on my left instep. Now that ball position 6 inches in front of my left shoulder.
Yeah.
Ball's still on my left instep. It's now under my sternum.
Yeah.
That will produce a fundamentally different impact.
Yeah.
Both in terms of attack angle, but also the direction the club is being swung.
Yeah. There's a great system that I found worked with players to at least give them a better chance of getting into that pre-swing alignment that we're talking about with driver. So I'll just grab that one off you. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I like to see players with, as a reference, set up with the golf ball just on the inside of their front foot. And what they do is they hold the golf club out just with their lead hand only, swing their back hand on, and then bend down to the golf ball. And this tends to work a lot better than players who would have the ball in the middle of their stance, set up the same as they would for an iron and a driver, and then simply move it forward, because we see them twist their bodies in all sorts of funky angles.
Except that it's a fundamentally different nature of impact when the ball's on the ground versus a tee.
Correct.
You're trying to hit up on it a little bit off a tee, you're trying to hit down on it.
Yeah.
Your low point directly under the ball would be great with driver, in front of the golf ball would be great with irons.
Yeah.
That demands either a different start position or a different swing. And both are entirely viable. I mean, I'm not suggesting there's a better way to do it. What works for you will probably not work for me.
Correct.
But ultimately, the outcome is different. So the input has to be different. And that's where I think a lot of people struggle with this concept. Well, how many reasonably good drivers do you see who can't hit an iron?
Yeah.
Why? Because they're very good at hitting up on it. That doesn't work when it's on the floor.
Yeah, absolutely. And everyone's mechanics and the way that we are built are different, and the way that we swing and the swing speed changes from player to player immensely, even if it might look like two players are very similar. So there is no one size fits all solution, but there is a framework that you can work within, which will at least put you in a better position to have the opportunity to hit a good shot.
The principle that there's one correct setup position, complete nonsense. There's not one correct setup position for all, but everyone has their correct setup position. As you've touched on, body types, obviously different clubs, different shot shapes, different speeds.
Big time.
All demand something slightly different at impact, and your start position should reflect that.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you can see, there is not a cut and dry method for getting the perfect ball position difference between your irons and your driver. Work with an experienced professional coach and you'll be able to figure out what works best for you. Thanks for watching this video. YouTube thinks that you would benefit from watching this one next. So click that card and it could be the tip that you need to take your game to the next level. I'll see you next time.